Sony's ZV-E10 Mark II has finally got the upgrades of the latest Sony cameras like built-in LUTs and 4K 60 frames a second. But are these features enough to actually justify upgrading? In this video, I'll be sharing my experience with this camera as a content creator and a casual hybrid shooter. By the end of this video, you'll have a better idea of if this camera is really right for you or if you should be looking somewhere else. I've had this camera for a few months now, and I've come to enjoy it as someone who used to own the Sony a6000 series cameras, as well as something like the big brother, the Sony FX30. The way that I often use this camera is mostly as a B cam. I usually set this up to just film my B-roll while my FX30 films my A-roll. Other times I'm using this as a webcam, which you do need a fast cable for if you want to go ahead. I'll link in the description for that particular cable. But in other times I use this baby for vlogging with the kit lens, as it keeps things nice and compact, easy to just throw around in your sling bag, which I prefer to carry instead of a backpack. Plus, the only thing that you really need to get this thing going is a mini tripod and a good SD card, which I use a 128 gig SD card, which is also a V60 card, good for recording 4K 60. In terms of audio, yeah, this is pretty decent with its smart audio features, but I prefer to use an external microphone like the DJI Mic 2s. But if that's a little too pricey for you, you can also use an external microphone like the Deity D4 Duo, perfect for vlogging as it captures front and back audio. So it looks good on the outside, but how does the image actually look like from the inside? Normally one upgrades to something like full frame, and that's totally cool if that's something you're looking into. But for most of us, sticking with an APS-C sensor that has better ISO performance, like up to 2500, is plenty enough. Not all of us are able to go ahead and buy the expensive camera lenses. So to be able to use the most of this camera, it's not getting a more expensive camera body, but rather getting a little more pricey lenses, like adapting the Sigma 18-35mm f1.8, or even faster primes from Viltrox, which is like the Viltrox 27mm f1.2, or the 75mm f1.2. Those are some of my favorite lenses. When it comes to vlogging on a budget, this kit lens is plenty enough. Although it's not ideal in low light, it still gets the job done. Fortunately, this camera isn't all about video, as it also takes excellent photos. This thing is gonna shine more in the daylight. With the kit lens, you're still going to be able to get great photos in the daytime, and you can get a couple good ones in the nighttime as well, or in low light situations. Asterisk on that. We'll come back to it. Without a doubt, you're getting some of the best image quality that you can possibly get at this price range. But the thing is it easy for anybody to make the most of that image quality? Fortunately, with a camera like this, like your iPhone, you can just shoot in auto. The only time you're really gonna notice the difference is if you wanna do certain special effects like long exposure photography or slow shutter photography in general. Sometimes low light situations, depending on how much lighting you actually got in your surroundings. When it comes to shooting vertical video, you can go ahead and pop out the screen and just hold it to the side, and you can see everything organized just as you would naturally, and you don't have to like tilt your head and go back and forth trying to change your settings just because it's not oriented vertically like with other cameras. If there's anything that I love the most about the ZV line, is that this little 3-notch switch. You can go from photo mode, video mode, to S&Q mode, which is your like time-lapse and slow motion mode. Really easy. You don't have to dive through the menus. You're just one switch and like that. You don't have to worry about this long dial of settings that you probably won't ever use. I can keep my photo settings separate. I can keep my video settings separate, and so on. I got a video on that as well. I'll leave that in the description for you to watch after this one. Everything about this camera just screams video. You got the solid flip out screen to go ahead and film yourself. And also you got this good beefy grip here just to be able to have a good handle on the camera. In terms of workflow, I really love that this thing also incorporates being able to use your own LUTs, so that if you don't want to go ahead and color grade later and you already know what kind of look that you want coming out of your images or your videos, you can just import them in, shoot your video, and then go ahead, dump them into your timeline and not have to take that extra step of color grading. For the beginners and the prosumers, this really has a lot of features worth looking into
if you want to go ahead and just want a camera that works right out of the box. But if you're looking to get more customizability out of this and use something like a camera rig, well, Felcam makes a foldable cage which allows us to go ahead and add different parts to our overall camera rig, and we can slap on a top handle, a side handle. If you want, you can put a NATO rail. I've attached a follow focus to use with my Laowa 16mm f2.8. That's pretty solid for a compact form factor. Without having to get something like a Sony FX30, because they share the same sensor, you also get a nice quality image out of this, and you can still rig it up as minimally or as big as you'd like. Sony markets this as a vlog camera, but if you rig this up the right way and you get the shots that you want in the right way, well, people won't even second guess if whether or not you're using a vlog camera or not. The thing is, if you're shooting 4K a lot, you do need to come up with a battery solution, which is either using a battery bank or using multiple batteries. For me, this camera lasts the whole day if I just shoot 4K 24 frames a second and I just get clips here and there. But if I'm overshooting, then I would require something like 2 to 3 batteries, especially if I put segments of 4K at 60 frames per second. When I shoot YouTube B-roll like this, I'm using 1 to 2 batteries. If I'm vlogging, usually it's just 1, if 2. No matter how much I enjoy this camera though, we do have to remember this is still not perfect. You see, one of the things that people loved about the original version 1 was that it had a mechanical shutter. This is mostly going to affect those who take photos. You see, without a mechanical shutter, this leaves our images prone to banding. Depending on the lighting situation in terms of what quality lights are being used in the indoor environment or even outdoor environment, well, it will show like these darker lines around your images, almost as if you were pointing it at like a projector and you saw like the different updated waves going up and down. It's just a nightmare when you have to deal with that. It's one of the reasons why I don't like the ZV cameras for photos in that reason, and it's just This is especially when I take photos in church. My shutter speed ends up being like 1/125th of a second, and sometimes it's good and sometimes I get blurry photos. It is what it is. Another thing that a lot of people don't like about this camera is there is no IBIS, or in-body image stabilization. For those of you who come from the Alpha 6000 series cameras without IBIS, this is still an upgrade because it still has digital stabilization, and it's good for things like having a handhold tripod-like shot. That's good. But if you're looking to get a little bit more panning shots or maybe like sliding shots and get a little bit more complicated, then this starts to be a little bit of a nightmare. Not only is your vlogging camera unsteady and shaky with its footage, but also if you use active digital stabilization, there's a crop on your images. So you think you're getting your 16 millimeters, but actually you're not. If you want a little bit more reach on the far end at 50 millimeters, sure, you can put in active digital stabilization and you're good. And then there's the third thing about this camera, which is there's no 4K 30 frames per second. I like to shoot my footage at 24 frames a second, but for those of you who like to shoot at 30, this is not an option for regular recording modes. We could use it for live streaming, shooting at 4K 30, but we can't use it for regular recording. So this could be an issue for you, but for me, I would like to have 4K 120. I know it's a little bit killer, but I think Sony could do it, and especially with it being the same sensor and all, maybe they just want to incentivize us to buy higher models. Because if we really want 120 frames per second, then we just have to go ahead and use 1080, which is okay too. By the way, you can shoot 30 frames a second in 1080. But all in all, how much is this camera gonna cost? For the body alone, it's $998. With the lens, it's another $100 for a total of $1,098 USD. So who's really gonna buy this camera? Well, I think it's really for the video first creators who want the latest Sony features or who want the latest camera without knowing what's in the camera market, or even if they do. They want one of the best cameras without having to spend upwards of $1,400 for something like the A6700, or even upwards of that for the FX30 at $1,800. This is perfect for people who really only care about videos and who may not even care about the photo features or lack of photo features like a mechanical shutter. Maybe they just take more photos with their phones, and maybe you don't even take a lot of photos at night. In the end, does this have the right features for you to justify an upgrade? If you really want the 4K 60, 10-bit 422, LUTs, and
even a little bit of stabilization, then this would be a good start. But if these features really don't matter to you and you'd like to save a little bit more money, well, consider the ZV-E10 Mark I or the A6400 if photos matter more to you. If you want to know what a $1,400 camera looks like, click this video over here if you want to see what a $1,400 camera is like.